All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to explore a fascinating paradox, one that kind of turns our usual ideas about trust completely upside down. It's all about why the people who seem to understand complex systems the best are often the very same ones who trust them the least. It's a pretty counterintuitive question, isn't it? You'd naturally think that the more you get how something works, whether it's the government or the economy or some global organization, the more you'd have faith in it. But as we're about to see, the data tells a very, very different story. So we're going to kick things off by looking at just one single number, a hard piece of data that really captures this whole paradox in a nutshell. It comes from this huge global survey on trust, and believe me, it has a lot to say. So what are we looking at here? This is a Pearson correlation. It's basically just a number that shows how strongly two things are linked. And this specific number, it shows a real, statistically significant positive connection between a certain psychological profile and strongly disagreeing with this statement. Overall, the government is competent and efficient. The stronger that profile is in a person, the more they disagree. So what is this mystery profile? Well, in the spiral dynamics model, it's known as the yellow value system, or vMEME. Now, this isn't about personality types. It's a way of thinking. It's all about being able to see the world as this big web of interconnected, complex systems. These are the people who don't just see the trees or the forest, they see the entire ecosystem, how it all fits together. And it's these exact people who are the most skeptical of how well our institutions actually work. Now, here's a really important distinction we have to make. This isn't just plain old cynicism. It's what we could call systemic discernment. See, the yellow mindset doesn't just start by assuming everything is broken. No, it starts by assuming everything is complex. And because it's complex, it demands constant, tough evaluation based on how well it's actually functioning, not just based on a fancy title or how things have always been done. And this table just brilliantly illustrates that nuance. I mean, look at this. The very same yellow profile that distrusts government competence shows a positive link with trusting most people. See, they're separating trust in individuals from trust in institutions. They tend to agree politicians are incompetent because they see the role as totally separate from the person's actual capability. And check out that strong negative number for an institution like NATO. That suggests a deep disagreement with its structure, a real tendency to evaluate its function today, not just its Cold War purpose. For this mindset, trust isn't just given. It has to be earned through performance you can actually see. Okay, so that's the analytical, systems thinking approach to trust. But it's a world away from how other mindsets experience distrust. To really get the contrast, let's look at what we could call three different flavors of it. First up, you've got the blue mindset. This worldview is all about order, rules, and moral authority. So for blue, when an institution fails, it's not just a letdown, it feels like an existential betrayal. When a big charity messes up or a trusted organization gets political, it feels like the whole moral foundation of the world is crumbling. The distrust is deep and it's personal. Then there's the red mindset. This is driven by power, getting ahead, and frankly, survival. From this point of view, just blindly trusting people is a huge liability. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and you don't just give trust away. You watch what people do, not what they say. It's not cynical, really. It's just a smart, tactical way to operate when you think vulnerability is just another word for weakness. And that brings us right back to yellow. Their distrust isn't a moral panic, and it isn't a defensive crouch. It is pure, analytical frustration. It's that feeling you get watching a clunky, rigid institution completely fail to adapt to the complex problems it's supposed to be solving. It's the frustration of seeing inefficiency and old habits win out over what actually works. So if all these mindsets react so differently, how on earth could you ever predict how a team or a whole company is going to react to something? Well, this is where things get really interesting. We move from psychology into math. The goal here is something that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, to basically formalize the soul of a group. The idea is to create what's called a psychological state vector. Think of it like a snapshot of a team's collective DNA, their fears, their values, their trust levels, all at one moment in time. You're essentially turning all that soft stuff, all that company culture, into hard data you can work with. And here's why that is such a game changer. Take one simple management decision, sending staff on unpaid vacation. An old school boss would just assume, well, everyone's going to hate this. But the data shows three totally different realities. A purple team, which is all about tribal loyalty, might actually see it as a shared sacrifice, something that makes them even closer. An orange team, driven by results and success, will absolutely hate it. They'll see it as a huge roadblock to their goals. And a green team, which cares a lot about community, will accept it, but only if it means saving their coworkers' jobs. It's the exact same action, but you get 3 opposite results, all of which are predictable if you know the group's profile. So here's how the engine actually works. You take a proposed action, let's say layoffs. You then filter that action through this massive matrix. We're talking over 13,000 known correlations between actions and psychological responses, just like the ones we've been looking at. And what comes out the other side? The model predicts the future psychological state of your team before you've even made the decision. And that's the whole point, right? It lets you see the invisible consequences, the stuff that never shows up on a spreadsheet. Your financial model might say that layoffs will save you X amount of money, but this model can show you the chain reaction, the butterfly effect. It can show you how that one decision triggers a spike in fear, which destroys trust, which then leads to what's called a leadership legitimacy crash. That's the point where your team just stops believing in you. It makes the invisible human cost visible. But we have to stop and ask a really critical question here. Is this yellow mindset, this deep institutional skepticism, is it truly a sign of sophisticated thinking, or could it actually be a massive blind spot? It's only fair to look at the counterarguments. And these are some really tough questions. You have to wonder, is this way of thinking less about pure systems analysis and maybe more about a kind of sophisticated libertarianism? Does it maybe ignore all the areas, public health, infrastructure, scientific research, where government is not only competent, but absolutely essential? Could this kind of skepticism be a luxury, a blind spot that comes from the privilege of not needing to rely on those institutions every single day? And maybe most importantly, does it risk tearing down public support for the very systems we all need to solve our biggest problems? These are not easy things to answer. Which really leaves us with this final big question to chew on. When we see trust in our big institutions going down, especially among the people who seem to understand them best, should we see that as a crisis that needs to be fixed? Or could it be something else? Could it be a sign that we're collectively growing up, moving away from a kind of blind faith and toward a demand for systems that are functional, that are adaptive, and that have to actually prove they're competent? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.